Hello and welcome to another edition of the Pain Geeks podcast, where we chat a little bit about the last month, um, and the kind of things that we've been discussing and reading on the Pain Geeks community, reflect a little bit on our Super Geeks live discussions, which is part of our paid subscription, which you can join by heading over to paingeeks.community and clicking subscribe there, and you can be part of these conversations. Um, my name is Laura Rathbone. I'm one of the co-founders of Pain Geeks. I'm also a pain specialized physiotherapist and work psychologically informed here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I'm joined today by my lovely co-founder, Christine. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Mhm. Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Christine Petrides. I am also a pain specialized physiotherapist working out of Cyprus at the moment. I live here since 2.5 years. I'm originally from Canada and lived in the Netherlands for many, many years. And now I'm living here and just really love working with all kinds of different people and learning as a clinician and growing, and Pain Geek certainly helps me with that, which is part of why we also started this community.
The growth.
Yeah, the growth.
Painful sometimes.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
physioing in different countries and learning different cultures, healthcare cultures, all of that comes with the territory as well, right? When you move from one place to another.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah. Mm.
So we do this podcast as a way of sort of, sharing our reflections on what we've been doing. And Pain Geeks is of course a essentially a reading community. It's a journal club. Each month we look at a particular paper where we spend, spending 4 weeks with a paper is quite a special experience in and of itself, like I know that, I have a tendency to sort of read and put it down. I read a paper quickly, get what I need out of it, then move on. But, sampling it, taking it slowly, reading it bit by bit, making sure I really understand what it's saying is a totally different reading experience. Um, and that's part of what we do on Pain Geeks every month. And then we also run our book club alongside our even slower read. And
Mhm.
although it never feels slow, the book, I always feel like I'm trying to, in a funny way, the book is sort of like a faster read. You've got more to get through in a small space of time.
Mhm.
Um, and this quarter, we are reading The Experience Machine by Andy Clark, which is encouraging us and supporting us to drop into this world of predictive processing, um, in through Andy Clark's interpretation of that, and the phenomenology, philosophy, and embodied cognition.
Mhm. In an
How?
extremely accessible way, I would also add. Because if
Yeah.
anybody's had any experience of trying to read maybe any other Andy Clark texts,
Mhm. Yeah.
or other sort of predictive processing papers or books, they tend to sometimes be a bit challenging, quite challenging,
Yeah.
heavily philosophical or um,
Mathematical.
mathematical, exactly. So, if you want to sort of dip your toes in or try to refresh or
Mm.
revise some of your sort of basic knowledge around predictive processing, this is a really, really nice way to do that.
Mm. Yeah. And it's really building on a theme for us, right? Because we read Anil Seth's Being You. Oh no, we haven't read Anil Seth's Being You yet. No, I keep saying this. I've read
Perhaps we
it.
will, though.
Yes. Yeah. And we also read Mark Solms' The Hidden Spring,
Yeah,
and we've just read
Lisa
Lisa Feldman
Feldman.
Barrett's How
Yeah,
Emotion is Made, and now we're in The Experience Machine. So we're sort of building on, and we also read Alva
Antonio.
Noe's
Oh, yeah,
Action in
yeah,
Perception.
yeah.
Yeah, and Out of Your Heads, did we do that one as well? I think we may have done that
No,
many years
no,
ago.
just Action and Perception and
Yeah.
Antonio Damasio's book,
Oh yeah.
Knowing, Consciousness and Knowing, I think it was called.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I try. Yeah, that one I didn't enjoy as much, I don't think. But yeah,
Mhm.
all of them have been really, it's been you sort of feel like you're building up a foundation now. And when you first read one book, it's like, oh, what does this one book mean in isolation? But then as you start reading more
Mhm.
and more, you can go back and you're like, oh yeah, that maybe that's what that person meant, or maybe that's what this connects to this. And yeah, you start to feel like you've got a bit more solid ground.
Mhm.
And coming into this book, yeah, it just sort of it's there's a lot of repetition, that in a way, when we first started reading it, when I first started reading about predictive processing, it felt like I was reading about a new thing every time. And now I can see the repetition and the recurring themes across the authors, and you start to see, oh, okay, this is a bit more neurocentric, or this is a bit more extended, or embodied, and like you can see the biases of the philosophers. I don't know if you have the same
Mhm.
experience.
Maybe to a certain degree. I'm not sure. But for sure, I have the same experience in the sense of like the building of knowledge, right? Like even when I reflect on when we started reading this book at the beginning of the quarter, and I said, like, this is my first predictive processing book. And then I was like, no, wait, I've actually
Hang
read
on a minute.
I've actually read like a bunch of others, but I think, I didn't even realize that I was back then, right? So that's
Mm,
also part of the experience is like even understanding what you're even reading about and the theory sort of underpinning, the ideology some people are bringing forward. So
yeah.
yeah, it's nice when you can start to see that a little bit more like the forest through the trees kind of thing, right? It starts
Yeah.
to make a little bit more sense. You put things together a bit more easily. So, but that's learning, right? That's learning in a
That's the
nutshell.
job. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe when we signed up to be clinicians, we didn't realize it
Mhm.
was a lifelong commitment to having no idea what this other person is talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a humbling experience. And although I think that's right, the more you read, like, I don't know, I don't have the feeling anymore of like I'm completely lost in predictive processing. And I mean, that makes sense. I've been thinking about this for a while, and
Yeah.
but it is, even when you're thinking about it for a while, it's not an easy philosophy it's not an easy theory to apply. And you also have to have an idea as to what philosophy you're applying the theory through. And then what does that mean to you as a human being, as a conscious agent in the world? But what does that mean to you as a human being that has the job of helping other human beings with their difficult experiences? And I think that's what Andy speaks to. And you can see the influence of having someone like Mick Thacker, to talk to regularly. Like there's this therapeutic, applied sort
Mhm.
of influence in there. And that's really lovely for us as clinicians because I don't feel like I've had that in many of the other books, this very explicit appeal to the therapies as a way of supporting people through their difficult stuff,
Mhm.
um, through the lens of predictive processing, which I think is really
Yeah.
through Andy Clark's application of predictive processing, I think is a helpful way to say that as well.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's
Yeah.
yeah,
And we've done some. So on Pain Geeks, we usually have a theme for the quarter, right? And we
yeah,
cover different things. And we've done a predictive processing theme once or twice, maybe
yes,
before, in terms of the journal club.
yeah.
Lots of books about predictive processing, but we'll certainly do another journal club themed quarter on predictive processing, probably in
Sure.
2027. And
Yeah.
that will be nice to go back.
Right. And I think it's not just, I mean, predictive processing is simply a theory of
Mhm.
how we think living organisms are self-maintaining and self-evidencing. Um, but it's at what level are we applying it? Through which sort of theory of consciousness as well? I think that's the interesting thing about predictive processing. It's not just our thing. You know, of course, you've got the free energy principle, which is a very specific, um, oh, what's the word? What's the thing? What is it? It's a math
Biolog
term.
like a biological or
Yeah, I'm so not mathematical, but like it's a very specific mathematical way of understanding like how organisms that rely on energy are able to stay alive whilst expending energy all the time, right? So how do they minimize the loss of that energy and maintain their own system? I think that's a an interesting a way for us as biologists, right? It's helped me connect to the fact that I'm a biologist, right? Not a scientific, not a biologist by a scientific perspective, but I am working in the field of human biology, which includes psychology and the way humans move and work and collaborate together. It has to, right? Because it's not separate.
Mhm.
Um, and it's been quite an exciting part of the last sort of clinical development. And then when we think about this book and then the paper that we've read this month, so this month we read the Fechner et al. Paper from 2024, and I'm going to read the title, but I'll also put it in the show notes. The effectiveness of pain science education on caregiver and children's knowledge, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviours. And this was a systematic review and meta-analysis. Um, well, it did its damned best to bring a meta-analysis together.
It
They worked
forced me
hard
to
for that.
bring this book out from like the dungeon from my
Yeah,
university
actually
days.
I have to agree. I also had not Andy Fields, that's the philosopher. I
Statistics.
had the statistical uh,
Yeah.
SPSS book as well. I was like,
Hmm.
what is a random effects model? Why are we doing
Hmm.
that? Oh, okay. Everything's different. That all the effects are different, so they can't pull them together in an easy way. And reminding yourself, and I think that's a good thing for us to reflect on as well. And it's something we talked a lot about in the discussions. Like, what's been the challenge with this paper? You know.
Hmm. Yeah. For sure, it was trying to understand what it is exactly they were trying to understand, like breaking down what is the actual question here,
Mm,
um, which was why we were talking a little bit about like, this paper as a systematic review was not as focused maybe as you would expect a systematic review question to be, because there was many outcomes they seem to be assessing with many different populations, and sort of gathering all of that from a large variety of different cohorts,
yeah.
and settings as well. So it was like a lot to sort of wrap your head around, just to understand what was happening. Um,
But like five papers in one, really, didn't
yeah,
it?
exactly.
And I guess that must have been how it felt to write it when you're like, okay, we want to try and I think you have also it's a body of evidence as well, isn't it? So this is a standalone paper, but it's part of people's work over time. Um, but yeah, like the vastness and the variation
Mhm. Yeah,
is
it was an undertaking for sure, and it was one of these moments where I was happy to have the time to read it and then read it a little bit later and read a little bit again later,
hmm
and by the end of the month, I felt like, okay, I have a better
mm
picture of understanding of, what it is they were trying to do, which populations they were taking from, um, which interventions and controls they used here and why did they use um, how did they pool the data for different
mm
populations that they were trying to compare? Um, so we were talking about forest plots and confidence
mm
intervals and all that stuff in our discussion as well, which was fun. But then also seeing understanding why they used also a narrative synthesis for some groups that
Mhm.
they were trying to compare because there was too much heterogeneity and
Mhm.
they couldn't pool the data like they would in a normal sort of
Mm.
meta-analysis. So it was interesting in that way to go back and to just be able to pick it apart and see how they were doing it. And obviously this is a very important topic that we would all love to have
Mm.
more, like a better understanding of the evidence behind it and
Mm.
how this may or may not be useful for us in clinical practice, right?
Yeah.
Especially this month when we were focusing on pediatrics,
Mm.
how influential you can be potentially with a chronic pain experience or the persisting of that experience if you can intervene at a younger age, right? That's a very profound idea.
Yeah.
And certainly very idealistic if we could find a way to do that. So it's important. This research is
Yeah.
really important, but it is very, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
very,
I
very
think.
clear that there's not enough research at this point to really even do a systematic review. Like,
Right. Or
uh,
the research that we have is looking at using different measures, different applications, different programs. Can you really compare a 4 week intervention with a 1 hour intervention? Like these are difficult things to do. I think, as I mean, I predominantly work in the adult field. Occasionally I'll see someone as young as 16, but mostly I work in the adult field, in the adult population. And I think many of us on the discussion were also, I think we were all mostly largely adult focused clinicians. But I think there was a couple of things that caught me about this month, and just spending a bit more time understanding chronic pain in young people as well. Like the statistic for chronic pain in young people is about the same. The recurrence the incidence level is about the same as in the adult population. Um, that's interesting, isn't it? Like because you do sort of get this. Sometimes I fall into this bias. Not as much as I used to, I think, but of sort of like, well, what can children really have experienced, right? All the stuff is in the adult world.
yeah,
Um, but it's just not true. Like kids are having difficult experiences. They are emotionally going through difficult stuff. And sampling it from a children's capacity, right? From, if you've only been alive on the world 8 years, and all of a sudden you now also have to process this disabling, not going away pain experience, you're doing that with only 8 years worth of cognitive learning experience, relational experience. And it sort of made me stop and think a little bit about the patients that I work with who have had pain since a very young age. And I think, how have you been dealing with that? This month I've noticed myself spending a lot more time asking, how was that dealt with? How did you feel? Did you have someone to talk to about that? Have you thought about that since then? Really allowing people to, in some ways, just go back and process that experience from an adult perspective as well and be able to reflect on that. Um, but yeah, that has hit me a little bit this month thinking about that. If,
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like a two sort of fold situation there, right? It's like children of a young age having to deal with this very difficult experience and move through the world, like you're saying. But then also, if we meet these adults later on in life, knowing that they've had this for such a long time, what does that mean going forward?
mm-hmm.
What sort of predictive power does that have? And I mean, or prognostic power, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know the answer to that question,
Mm.
but it certainly it certainly fills out your clinical picture if you're, really trying to get a better understanding of what this experience is for this person, this individual sitting in front of you. And, potentially, yeah, it was a bit crude way to say it, but like what you're up against, which, yeah.
It can feel like that, can't it, sometimes? Like
Mm,
when you're trying to take in somebody else's trauma and life experiences, and as the therapist, sometimes there's this feeling of it all becomes your job.
mm,
Yeah, it's a hard thing to talk about because you want to talk about it kindly, but at the same time, it is also a job, right? We do choose to come in to do this work, and the constant thing, the conversation I have with a lot of clinicians, and we've had this conversation a lot as well, haven't we, between us? Like how do I hold this space as a therapist safely for the me that is a human that has to go home, as well, and safely for the person in front of us. Um, and it can feel like a lot, and sometimes, of course, whatever feels like a lot for us must feel like I mean, we only see the tip of whatever of the iceberg of what people choose to show us can show us, um, and that's yeah. I think the struggle sometimes is when um, the feeling of like, oh, I now have to facilitate positive change, but there's so much that this person has been through. Where do I start, sort of thing, and what can I expect? What can I put on my own shoulders?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that leads very nicely into, pain science education in general in the clinic, because what is it, right? Like this is something we talked about a lot last month and this month. And, I notice this in myself, but I also notice it in other clinicians, talking about that sense of responsibility. Sometimes we have this feeling or frustration of like, well, I said it to them, I told them this thing. So, you know,
There's the
job's done,
change.
why aren't they doing it? And that's just a really interesting moment also, right? And because one of the things we were discussing as well is, right, like pain science education is so many things.
Mm-hmm.
It's the content, right? What
Mm-hmm.
is the content exactly? What is the delivery of the content?
Mm-hmm.
What is the theory of learning that we're using also behind
Mm-hmm.
making and delivering that content?
Mm-hmm.
How are we adapting that to the individual sitting in front of us?
Yes.
And I mean, we like to think that like I just said a sentence and it landed into their ears, so it should,
Work its magic.
yeah, that's it. But gosh, it's so much more complicated than that. And how many of us are stopping to think like, okay, well, why didn't that land? Or what is going on here that I'm missing or I could be doing better?
Mm,
What should I maybe start looking into more, or trying to
yeah.
understand what it is that's um, like salient for this person, right? Everybody has a different learning style.
Yeah.
So,
And what is and I think you exactly like PSE, it's not just the delivery of information. And I think you see that so much more in the way people like Dave Butler and Lorimer Moseley are talking about it now versus maybe 15 years ago. Or maybe it's becoming more clear, but it's like you're right. Like this is and I've been saying this for a long time. Like it's a therapeutic decision. I strongly believe this is a therapeutic intervention, and I'm happy to go into discussion with that. But this is cognitive change that we're working on. We're trying to update somebody's beliefs. We're trying to move them in a positive direction from one thing to another. That's therapy. That's a therapy process. Um, because we're doing it in the context of ill health. Education outside of that context, when it's just delivered, that's different. There is therapeutic effect there, but the therapy process isn't necessarily the focus. When you're doing it individually, it's a therapy process. And therefore, it's a therapeutic choice, it's a therapeutic decision that you make based on what you know about this person and what's going to be helpful and what is the change they're trying to achieve. So then PSE has a role in supporting that specific change. Um, and that is a tricky space to hold, because you have to know what the belief system is, and you also then have to be relatively confident, or make the decision that the belief is the thing that's getting in the way, and that's what we need to do the cognitive change work around.
Mm.
um, and then you have to start thinking, well, how do I, if for someone that's had this belief for such a long time, which is not illogical, right? It's a perfectly sound belief. It's the dominant way of thinking about pain. When I'm thinking here about pain and injury, that it's one to one, that
Mm.
it's causal, that it's relative as well, right? And what we might be trying to introduce is this flexible understanding of pain, that it's not necessarily one to one, it's not necessarily part of injury. So as Morton who he says, like, not everything that hurts is an injury. Like, we're trying to start introducing flexibility here. Well, how do you, changing beliefs, changing thoughts and changing beliefs are also two very different processes that even, our psychology colleagues say this is a really difficult thing to do. And it requires lots of repetition, lots of different ways of presenting the same data, lots of lived experiential change. So experiencing the contradiction in their own data.
Mhm.
This is a conflict comfortable zone, right? Where you're gonna
Yeah.
have to be able to hold that, um, and it really requires us to drop into that therapy space, I think, and the therapy skills. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking now, like, also about, yeah, okay, which setting is the best for that, right? And maybe one-to-one is the best setting, but maybe one-to-one not with me, but with you, but or with somebody else,
Yeah.
right? Like, these things are also changing. And then, some people learn better in a group, by
Mm-hmm.
observing others, more
Mm-hmm.
of like a social learning theory. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why therapy or group sessions can come in really handy. And
Yeah.
they see other people going through relatable things, and also, maybe delivering some kind of pain science education to them through a peer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, wouldn't it be so interesting to be able to figure out where these people would be best suited, or is it the
Yeah.
variety of all of these things? Or
Yeah.
yeah, it's so
I
hard
mean,
to know.
I mean, probably when I think about my own patient population, the people that I work with, I think, yeah, it would be helpful for you to sample this same information without too much conflict between the theory, right? So that's also difficult, because it's
Mm.
updating all the time, and the resources don't update as quick as the science. So that's tricky. But like, to be able to keep sampling this information from lots of different ways and in lots of different sort of speeds and lots of different contexts. So like, I'm thinking about us and the journey we've been on with Pain Geeks, slowing down how we relate to a text. That's something that somebody can do at home, and then we can be doing some individual stuff, and then maybe there's a group process happening here, and of course a group therapy versus therapy delivered to a group therapy where it's facilitated as a group. There's a two
Mm.
different kind of approaches, and it's like, yeah, wouldn't it be lovely if somebody could be fully immersed? And then I think, oh, but also, like, that would be a lot for an
Mhm.
individual, that's also a huge ask, because then their whole life becomes about pain, and that's not the goal. Like, the goal
Right.
is that pain sort of somehow diminishes in its sort of causal power over this person's life. I mean, the
Mm.
pain is there, and the pain may still be the same, but it doesn't impact on quite so much of their lives. And then I always have this conflict. I don't know whether you're the same. I would love to hear your thoughts, where I'm like, not just what is PSE, how do I deliver it, what's going to be right, but like, should I,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, but I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, great. I think we should always be thinking about this, but I'm also thinking, yeah, but that intensity, might be the thing that tips the scale to some kind of change, right? Like that's
Mm,
sort of like barrage, right, of like information and that, maybe it doesn't, and we talk about this too. We talked about it even just today when we're thinking about all the books that we've read in the past. Like
mm,
we're not going to update immediately, but
mhm,
over time we will, because we will keep going back to some of those experiences and things that we remember and
mm.
applying them and reapplying them to the things we're experiencing now. 'Cause I'm just thinking about like a language course right now, right? Like an intensive language course is probably going to be a bit more effective for me than just taking one class, every week and a half. But it depends also on how much I'm applying it, and it depends on how much I'm, yeah, using
Yeah.
that information, sampling it.
Yeah, and also the system that you're in, like when I was learning Dutch in
Mm,
the Netherlands, like,
mm,
that's a different experience to trying to learn Dutch in
mm,
England,
mm,
right? Where you're
mhm,
like, yeah, that is good.
mhm,
Lekker, like it doesn't have the cultural context. And this makes me reflect on my time in input, where we did this fully immersive 4 week inpatient program every day, 8 hours a day. We were really working all from the same page. We were all delivering. There was no internal conflict in the team in the sense that we were all using ACT. We were all believed that people could live well with chronic pain. And what was always interesting to me was like, and I guess what I was always concerned about was, okay, we've given people this experience in this bubble here,
yeah.
but then they go back. So what's the relevance? What's the influence of this on a person's home system that might be completely different? I mean, in some ways we give, it's a bubble of like, you're in the capital city, you're right in the middle of London, there's security, there's food security, like it's all there, it's all safe
Mhm.
and secure, and then they go home to something else. And we saw our patients a year later, and often what they said was like, it that was a great experience. But then I had to go home and figure out what I could take from that. And
Yeah.
it wasn't like I took that and transplanted it into my home life. I had
Yeah.
to go home, go back into my normal routine, and then just sort of start sampling that and thinking, okay, well, maybe I can do a bit more of this, maybe I can do a bit more of that.
Hmm.
And it sort of changed how I understood my role. It changed the temporality of what I thought my work was.
Hmm.
Like you, I was brought up in the physio world of like, you should see change in a session. We want to see meaningful. And now I think, oh my God, my poor younger self, desperately trying to change someone's fibromyalgia symptoms in one session. Like
Mhm.
that's not fair to do that to clinicians. We shouldn't, that's not fair. And it's also not fair to our patients that we're working with. But like now I understand, okay, we do this thing here, and if we can have a really good experience in this moment, maybe you'll remember and sample that, and it will help you, the person that I'm working with, develop their own way that I could never imagine because I'm not them. I don't have their experiences or their uniqueness. Um, into something that works for them, and that's the temporality of that has stretched for me. Like it might not be within the first few months, it might be something that we look back on 9 months later and they say, oh yeah, that has actually, yeah, I see now there was a link. I'm doing this, and that sort of helped move me in this direction.
Mhm.
I think that's the value of what we're doing. Like learning is a process, not an event. It's not something you do
Mhm.
in a moment. It's
Mhm.
so and this brings me to the humanities piece that you invited us for
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
week. Because it would
Yeah.
you share that
So
with us?
we usually do a humanities piece for our final discussion of the Journal Club month.
Mm,
And it looks like often um, a piece of artwork or a poem or a story or a short video. song, really sort of um, all kinds of different um, pieces. And, we use that to help us anchor the whole experience of what we're reading, our clinical work, our learning process, our community connection to the humanities, because um, yeah, we just don't feel like we can separate those things from our work in our lives. And it's always really interesting because it brings up a lot of, we get to see a lot of individuality in people, of course, and their perspectives, and also how they sort of process information and see things differently from us, which is always an amazing reminder. Where you're like, oh, whoa, I didn't think of that at all. And yeah, it's always really nice. And so this month, because we were doing this paper in particular on pediatrics and pain science education, um, I just had this idea that, wouldn't it be nice to do something a little bit differently than what we normally do and try to reconnect with our younger selves a little bit. So the invitation was to bring some kind of memory, photograph, memorabilia, toy sort of item from uh, linked to your childhood or to a moment in your childhood or something like that. And so we brought those to the session that we had this past Wednesday, and uh, everybody was very brave and very open to share these very meaningful items and experiences with us as a group. And we spent quite a lot of time sharing with that together. And it was really interesting, and it led really beautifully into the paper.
Mm.
Um, when we were thinking about a lot of these things that we've been just talking about, like how these memories and early childhood experiences can influence us later on in life, and how will continue to sample from them later on, and how they might shape us. Um, so that was nice. Yeah. How
Yeah,
did you
I
think?
I thought it was a really poignant activity, and I think for us in adult care, it's a great reminder that like children aren't mini adults; they're grown up. Adults are grown up children, right?
Mm,
So it's like we we have all of this experience. When someone comes into your clinic room, you know, if they're 35, they've got 35 years worth of experience and learning and making sense making on the earth. Um, and if they're 16, then they've got 16 years. And if they're 75, they've got 75 years. And that's what that's what we get to work with in that moment. We sort of come into that person's life. Um, and what a privilege that they invite us to support them on something that's causing great distress. We get to do that. And it is challenging, but that's the reminder that we get to do that, right? But but when we're thinking about such a what's the impactful like experience like pain. This person has had many experiences of pain and has built up their own belief system, and they keep either adding to it or confirming it or slightly changing it, slightly altering it over time. But also these like events, like what is a learning moment? Is it in the moment, or is it how you keep sort of reappraising your relationship with that moment? And you're
mhm,
right, like it can be something that someone said to you, it can be something that you saw once, it can be even, like a meme you read on Instagram that you just sort of keep going back to, and you're like, what was that? There was something there for me.
mhm,
And you might have first come into contact with that as as a 10-year-old, and then you might go back as a 20-year-old and reappraise that relationship with that thing, and then maybe as a 30-year-old. And but each decade, each time you go in, you've got that little bit more information, and so your learning relationship with that moment or that thing that has stood out to you, that salient piece of information can update and change. It can strengthen and it can reform. It can, what you thought about something when you were 16 might be very different to how the 40-year-old you looks back on that thing. And the 40-year-old you can appreciate all of the journey that it's taken. Um, and again, it's sort of this activity really sort of spoke to me in terms of that temporality of what we do, and what we're sharing with people. Yeah, I found it a really beautiful activity.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It was really nice. And above all, it's also just nice to hear these stories, of these pe
Mhm.
of people that we have been connected with for, all these years since we started Pain Geeks. It's always a pleasure to learn more about each other and just to go a little bit deeper in our personal relationships with each other because we are
Mm.
at the end of the day a community. And of course, we are focused on, learning about the science and our clinical work,
Mhm.
but it's also a space for us as humans to connect with each other and, find security and grace, in our just way of being, as humans, clinicians, people working with others who are
Mm.
in pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always the humanities piece is always a highlight, I think, of every discussion.
Yeah. I love one of our members, Ricky, who joins us when he's able to. He always says, like, I don't know how you get these things to link up so
Mm.
well. Like, you're doing that, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we just give you the humanities piece, and that's the amazing thing as well as group facilitators. Christine, do you ever just sit back and think, what incredible minds we have
Mm,
on this call right now? I've got goosebumps saying that. Like,
mm,
you know, and also, isn't it amazing what human beings can do? Like, we see these links everywhere. We're looking for ways to best learn and to get as much out of it. Um, which is also, both a lovely reflection on the group of clinicians that we see that are working in pain. That gives me, every time, it gives me hope. It makes me feel like, oh, yes, we are doing great work and we
mm.
should be really proud of the work that we're doing. And, oh,
Yeah.
how lucky our patients are, and the patients who see these beautiful clinicians that are in our community are, that they found these clinicians. Um, but also there's and this, particularly this theme, because we're thinking about education and learning, how much the learner wants to learn, even if they don't, like, on a sort of like explicit way, they don't necessarily know that they want to learn. They will start making links and connections and building up meaning, if we offer people the opportunity and hold the space for them to do that. We almost can't help ourselves, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
learn. We just,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
it's true. So what do you think that this month has changed for you in terms of pain science education in your clinical application or not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have opinions, as many people, about pain science education, but I think I feel more connected to the, I guess, and also people like the experience machine is sort of saying, like, people can't help but learn, right? It's almost written into our nature, if we can say something like that, which I'm sure I will challenge in myself later. But
Mhm.
like you, people can't help but learn, and maybe my role is to just keep giving people the space to update and learn and challenge their own rules and beliefs, and allow that flexibility to go. And maybe, you know, it doesn't have to be information giving it can be experience having. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that. How about you?
I think that, and I think that this is maybe like, how do I phrase this? Like, we were sort of talking about this before the podcast as well. Like, it is so vulnerable to talk about how we do things in our own clinical practice, right? Because it
Mm,
feels a bit revealing potentially of
mm,
our own inadequacies was something that we said. But like, obviously we're not inadequate, but it can feel that way a lot of the
mm,
times because it's hard to reach everybody or to feel like you can or have. And I feel like there's a little bit of a risk maybe when you read also papers like this, because you're a bit confronted with that, like you see
mm,
what other people are probably are intervening with or
mm,
using. And it's hard not to directly reflect that on your own practice, like, oh, okay, how much pain neuroscience, specifically like neurological, information am I bringing forth in my clinical work? And, so my instinct is a little bit of, I think maybe I need to be a bit more explicit
mhm,
with some of my pain science education, because I think I'm
mhm,
not sure sometimes if the message is a bit too subtle,
mhm,
um, trying to wrap it up in a more experiential way, which um, you know, so we reference a lot, right? Like the iceberg, and you need to
mhm,
know a lot more as a clinician than necessarily what you're bringing forth into the
mhm,
room.
mhm,
But just my own personal reflections on my own personal practice. I'm
mhm,
wondering if maybe I should be bringing a bit more from the bottom of the iceberg into
mhm.
the room.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that it's wonderful when we share our vulnerabilities around
Mm,
these questions because that's how we develop our sense of practice. So,
mm,
like, yeah, it is so I'm can't help myself but drop into a bit of a therapy role sometimes, and I don't want to do that here, but like I do hear the should stick, and I'm like, stop shoulding yourself. You should not should. And like, but it
yeah.
is tricky because when you start using comparison, you're like, oh, I should be
Mhm,
more like that.
mm,
But I think what you're also saying is, I can be more like that, right?
mhm,
So I can choose to do that, and I can choose to do this. Um, and there will be times where and I know this in myself, like I sometimes think, oh, I go to if I especially if I go into something like a neuroscience, a PSE training, or I speak to someone like, if I go on a NOI course or something, and I think, oh, I must be doing more. I need to talk more about channels. Like they make it sound so exciting, and
mm,
receptors and things. And then I think, okay, that's a course, right? That's been delivered for a very specific reason with its own goals, and I value that enormously, and I love it when I go into it. But individually, this is relational work that we're doing,
mm,
and I think it's not a fact yet that people need neuroscience knowledge to recover from pain. I think there is a group of people who have had that experience, and they advocate very strongly for that, and I agree with that. Um, and there are a group of people within probably my patient population that I think, yeah, you could really do with some neuroscience here.
mm,
You need that kind of data, that kind of evidence that's going to be reassuring to you in order to change your beliefs. It's going to help you
mhm,
know that I know what I'm talking about.
mhm,
Um, and then you will be able to start exploring what you know and what's right for you, right? So there's a trust element, I think, that comes with neuroscience. But I don't know if it's a fact that that people need neuroscience to recover from pain. It's certainly not, I think that's it, isn't it? It's,
yeah, I
yeah.
certainly agree with that. And I think, if we go one step deeper, maybe that reflection is a bit more about maybe I need to have more variability, in my potential to deliver because like we have spoken about, right? Like everyone is going to be responsive to sort of different ways. Not that you can always figure that out, but if I'm more comfortable with a variety of ways, because I've practiced that and I've tried on different hats, then I can more easily bring that in and be more flexible and adjustable within my own sessions with people. And at the end of the day, maybe that's also just more helpful for us in general as humans because we do learn when we have a similar example or experience from different perspectives and different angles. So
Mm.
in general, I think it's good to just think about, okay, how can I also do this in a slightly different way and this way and this way and this way and you know resist the urge to fall into your your easy sentences that flow out of your mouth um, often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, oh, I could talk about this for hours, and I know time is on its way.
Mm,
But this is definitely something that we on the in the community, I think we will keep coming back to this because
of
pain
course.
science education, patient education, so patient education, of which pain science education, of which pain neuroscience education is a
Mm,
part of, right? And it's like that is a big topic for us, because it doesn't, and so we will keep coming back in the community to this. But I think now we're gonna bring this podcast to an end. And say,
mhm.
well, firstly, I would like to say thank you to you, Christine, for a lovely month, and yeah, also your openness and vulnerability in this conversation, every conversation we have. I always grow from our conversations, so I would say thank you to you. Um,
Thank you also.
and to our lovely super geeks that come. We hold our chats on a Wednesday morning in Amsterdam time, and then every month we also hold an evening discussion. At the moment is on Mondays, but we are playing around trying to figure out the best day and time for that. Um, and so a huge thank you to our community and to the researchers for doing this work and giving us the thing to share and join with each other on
Mhm.
and to grow from. And to anyone that's listened here. So if you have enjoyed this talk, don't forget to put a comment, like and subscribe,
Mhm.
and help us.
And
Yeah.
stay tuned for this discussion that you had with Joshua Pate.
Yes, so we, as part of our Super Geeks offering, we also often talk to the researchers that we're reading, and we are very happy that Joshua Pate came on to have a chat with us. So that will be going up into our Super Geeks platform, which is our paid subscription platform for anyone that wants to join us and learn a bit more from him and his perspective on his work, which is always such a nice conversation to have with research, especially someone that has been, so prolific in such a short space of time. This is someone who's written, like, I think like 50 papers since 2019 or something like that. Like, I mean, this is a solid body of work.
Wow.
Um, so, yeah, if you want to hear what Josh had to say about pain science education, not just in children, but in general, then yeah, head over to our Super Geek subscription and we will see you there. Otherwise, we'll see you next month for more Pain Geeks chat. Okay, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.